Welcome to the Inclusion Solution Live. I'm your host, Gabby Gonzalez of the Winters Group, and today we are continuing our Justice for All season of the podcast, which celebrates the Winters Group's 40th anniversary of fighting for equity and justice in the workplace. We are joined today by one of the speakers and moderators at our recent Justice for All Summit, Kimberly Lee Minor, CEO of Women of Color Retail Alliance, or WOCRA. Kimberly is a highly accomplished executive and advisor with over 30 years of dynamic leadership experience spanning retail, brand management, and e-commerce. Her expertise has driven success across diverse brands, ranging from $40 million to $4 billion in revenue. In addition to recently being appointed CEO of WOC Retail Alliance and serving as a faculty member at the Fisher School of Business at The Ohio State University, she also contributes as a board director of Blue Conic, an award-winning MarTech company. Passionate about empowering women, she often speaks on topics such as leadership, economic empowerment, and professional development, including a recent TEDx talk. Her contributions have been recognized industry-wide, earning distinctions like being named one of Rethink Retail's top retail experts for 2024 and inclusion in WWD's esteemed list of 50 Women of Power. Beyond her professional endeavors, she actively engages in civic initiatives, serving on boards such as Dress for Success, New Albany Community Foundation, the Columbus Association for the Performing Arts Board of Directors, and the Columbus Fashion Alliance. Kimberly and her husband, Mark B. Minor, Esquire, have 2 sons and a dog named Blue. All right, so welcome, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. And just to start us off, I just wanted you to have a chance to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, like how you came to this work and what inspired you to go into retail.
Well, that's a great question. So let me start with what inspired me to go into retail, and then I can tell you how I got here. So what inspired me to go to retail is that I needed a job. I mean, truth. I was in school. My degree is in radio, television, and film, and I had a jazz show. I worked at Power 99. I was in Philly, and I worked at Power 99 and WFIL, and I had like the teen news show, and I just thought that's what I was going to do. Like I was going to be the next Oprah. And as I was sending out my tapes and meeting, people and having interviews, there were elements of the business that I didn't know, that I didn't feel really comfortable with. And where I was getting offered jobs was, maybe like the Dakotas and very small markets. And I just thought, well, wow. I don't know if it was ego or practicality, maybe, and some values maybe thrown in there. But I just felt like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is really what I want to do. Do I love this enough to put myself through all these issues? And so I had already gotten into grad school, but I wanted a job, right? I didn't want to just be a student. And I had taken different jobs. Like I worked at a modeling agency. I was 21 and I got to decide who went on to school or who got an agent. Like that's crazy, right? And then just silly jobs. And I was on campus and I used to run into the recruiter from Macy's executive training program. He was a brother, and he used to say to me, you should really consider this. And I said, retail? No way. Why would I? My parent, like I went to college to work in retail. That makes no sense because all I knew about retail was the mall, right? When I was in high school, I had worked part-time at different stores and stuff, and I liked it, but I didn't see a future because I certainly didn't want to be a manager, right? I was like, I don't. And so long story longer, I was talking to my dad one day because he was like, yo, this starving artist thing is not happening. Like, you need a job. You need a job that has benefits. You need a job that has career path. Like you need to figure your stuff out, like get it together. And I was like, well, there've been so many things. Most of them are like in finance or insurance, and I'm not interested in that. And, people say I can use my communication skills in different ways, but none of them sound interesting. And I really want to tell stories. And this guy keeps telling me I can do that, but in retail. And when he found out that it was the Macy's executive training program, he was like, you need to go for that, because Macy's is known to be the Harvard of retail. You're going to grad school. You could then take that. You don't ever have to work a day in retail if you don't want to after you get the training, and you can take it and do anything. And my dad wasn't often the person to give advice. And so I thought, okay, when he talks, he doesn't talk a lot. I'm going to take this advice. And so I that's how I got into retail. I followed that path, even though I had no background, no training at all. And I did use my communication skills. I used the fact that I love to tell stories and connect with people, right? And so that is how I got through retail. And I started in the training program, went through the training program, I got recruited to Express. Express was amazing because even though it was a big company, like I was part of the team that took it to the first $1 billion, and it was a big company, and we worked like 85, 90, sometimes 100 hours a week. It was very entrepreneurial. And so if you brought new ideas to the table that progressed the business, or you brought new products that sold out, you got promoted, because they're like, okay, now you keep moving. And it was where I learned that just having the job doesn't get you promoted. Right. And but I also learned, baptism by fire, but you learn how to really move yourself, your career, and a business forward, in that you are responsible for every aspect of whatever role you have. And you support your team members. It's not like, that's not my job, right? See where those gaps are, and if you can step in those gaps, those are the people who get promoted. And so that's what brought me into retail, and really, I think, solidified my journey in this industry. And then we moved from Columbus to back to the East Coast. My mother had passed away and my dad was very ill, and I became legal guardian of my grandparents and my father. And I had to be closer, but they didn't want me coming back. Like, they're like, you cannot come back here. We worked too hard to get you where you needed to go. And so I moved to New York. So I moved to New York City, and that was an hour away from Philly. So, jump on the Acela and get there. And so, I just continued. I worked for Foot Locker. When I went into Foot Locker, I was the, director of product development, and was able to build that again, seeing the gaps, built it into a whole organization for all of their private label product and accessories, servicing all the Foot Locker brands. So that East Bay, Champs, Foot Locker Kids, Foot Locker Ladies, Foot Locker Canada, and Foot Locker Europe, and built that business from $200 t-shirt business to almost $1 billion actual product business. And it's still around. That organization still exists. I actually met someone in January at NRF who was now in the role that I had. So it was very cool to, create something and then see that it's still sustaining. And so that's just kind of been my thing, like coming in, seeing the white space, and how do I grow it? How do I expand it? And so I've worked for several retailers. I like to say that if you go to a mall, I would probably say 85% of those brands I've worked for or led in some way. And as I was going along my career, I was usually the first or the only. And, it didn't really affect me early on, because that's who I had been. Like, my family was the first Black family to move in our neighborhood, and we were the only Black family for 12 years. And, when I was in school, I was the only one in my classes. That's kind of like, I didn't think about it, because it was just who I was, and I felt comfortable in any room I walked into.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, like I was just raised by people who were like, if you're in the room, you should be there.
Oh, I love that method.
Room, you need to figure out why. Right? Like, ask some questions, find out why you're not in that room, and then figure out how you get in that room. Like, that was just, there was no feeling sorry for anything, right? Like, just figure it out. And so I was at I guess I shouldn't say the company, but I was a VP, and I was the first. And it was the first time that I really felt like, oh, I know why I didn't get that, or I know why I'm not in that meeting. It's not about my business. Okay, they know each other. This is a sorority, and I am not a part of the sorority. And if we were on campus, because I'm in a sorority, but if we were on campus, that's not the sorority that I would be in. And I started like looking around and saying, yeah, well, this is not cool. And so that was like 2007. And I reached out to friends and said, hey, Market Week's coming up. Let's get together because I'm sure other people are feeling like this too. And I had reserved a room at B. Smith's, and I'm telling my age when I say B. Smith's, but anybody who's listening to this who knows who B. Smith is, who's this iconic. She was like one of the first. I think she was pre Beverly Johnson. Like she was a beautiful model. She had a restaurant. Like she started the first lifestyle. Like she used to have shows on TV. She was amazing. Black woman in New York, and she had a restaurant, and we reserved. I remember telling her, because she used to be in the restaurant, right? And I would go there, and I was telling her that I was reserving the room for this reason. And she was like, that is so cool. We have to all do that, like get people together. And 6 people came. 6. And I was like, where's everybody? I reserved this room, right? And, we didn't have social media or anything in 2007. So there was no way to get, who's coming.
Get the word out. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so they were like, yeah, first of all, there's not many of us. I know you think you're just missing out, but there are not many of us. And second of all, what are you going to do with them if they were here? Like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but let's just think about it should be different, right? It should really be different. And as we are pulling people in, we have to make sure that their experience, if we leave or, because as one person, you can only do so much. We can do a lot more. And plus my kids were babies then. And I was like, okay, all right, well, let's just stay in touch. And so fast forward to 2019. Yeah, 2019. And a bunch of us, and when I say a bunch, I mean 7 of us got together at Women in Retail Leadership Summit. And one of us was speaking on tech in retail, which is great. And everybody else, except me, because I did not want to talk about this subject, but everybody else was on one panel about DEI. And I just thought, these are business leaders. These are women of color who are leading business, and they're talking about DEI. And I have a problem with that because that's where they put us. They put us in HR. They put us in DEI. They, in places that if you were supported, you could be impactful, but I'm just going to put you there and give you a title and not necessarily give you the support that you need. And there are those of us who are in business roles and we're growing and driving business, but we're not getting the stage. And so that was my first issue. And then the second issue, which was the catalyst for WACRA, was they had an outdoor event and they had all these tables on the lawn. And you could look out and see all these women, and there were hundreds of them. And we were all sitting at one table, and we had 1 or 2 seats open, and we were the only color. And we were all, and I said to them, look out. Do you see anybody who's a person of color? Like, do you see any other women of color here? And they were like, oh, they have to be somewhere. I'm like, okay, I want you to walk out there and touch them on the shoulder, right? Like, where are they?
Where?
There was no shoulders to be touched. And I said, this is an indication that nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. So we're all at a certain part in our careers. Like, I think, everybody was at least a vice president, vice president, president, what have you. We could continue to just be fine, have our 401k and retire, or we could do something. And I told you earlier, like my parents raised me, do something. Ask a question. Figure out why it's not, like, that's on you. Nobody's going to do it for you. Figure it out. And so, good or bad advice, it has led me to be a person who's like, okay, I don't like this. I have to do something. And so I said, well, I'm not sure what we can do, but we're going to do it. And so what we did was came back and I posted on LinkedIn because we had all these tools now, right? We could. I posted on LinkedIn. I told the story I just told about B. Smith. And I said, it's what, 12 years later? Hopefully by now things have changed and we just don't know each other. So minimally, we should know each other. If you are, and I described what we were, which is what Walker has become, women of color. It's actually grown beyond this, but at that time we were looking for women of color who were directors and above in retail. We had over 100,000 impressions and shares, and it was crazy. And so we did a virtual meetup. We should know each other. And we did, like, there were 100 people there. And so we did 20 groups of 5 breakouts, did different prompts. And the one prompt was, never have I ever. And the answer was never have I ever. And 18 of the 20 breakouts said, never have I ever looked to my right or my left and seen someone who looked like me, shared a life experience, or I knew might have my back.
Wow.
Might have my back. Not would have my back, but might have my back. And I was like, okay, yeah, I got it. I know what we need to do. We need to fix that. Like, that's ridiculous. But I feel it. I feel it. Like, there were tears. Like, we felt it. Like, we've been, like, lifting this burden individually. We need to change that. And so the people who I had been talking to, I sent out information. Do you want to be a part of this? And some did. And those are the people who are still with us. And we went from there. We said, okay, so first we should know each other, because while we can't go into these companies and say, you have to hire 5 people because one is not enough, right? Tokenism doesn't work. We know that, right? Justice for all, tokenism does not work because you do not have power. You just don't. You're one person. But on top of that, if you don't know where your support is, even outside the building, then you're just really the stress and the burden of carrying microaggressions and knowing that you're one person who's really talented, but you can only go so far because one person is not going to make a difference. And if you make a mistake, then they might never hire someone else that looks like you because, we had that one person and they didn't do well. Like, all those things are on that one person's back. And so that's why we should know each other was so important. So we started having those virtual gatherings, and now we continue to have them in person. And then we also started a lunch and learn, my leadership journey. And that was all about what I just talked about, like understanding, because for younger people, and it's so interesting, I had this conversation with my niece this morning, like, they look on LinkedIn and they get intimidated because they see our titles, right? But they don't know what it took to get those titles. And so I said, if we can have leaders who are talking about their leadership journey, and not about their titles, but about their journey and what it took to get to where they are, but really talking about what are the things you had to do, not so much the title. We can find the title. Titles aren't that important. It's about the person and what were the challenges that you had and how do you overcome them. And that was really successful. We had that for 2 years. And then we branched out. So in 21, Wakra had their first, in real life gathering. It was bomb. It was in New York City and it was packed. In 22, we built our board to 12 people and we had 3 events, 1 in San Francisco and 2 in New York. By 23, we had 30 events and we had then expanded into Toronto. And so we are now in New York, Columbus, Ohio, San Francisco, I said Toronto, Los Angeles, and Philly. And so we continue to grow. And it really is still based on we should know each other because I think that's the foundation. To me, that's the foundation for everything. If we know each other, we know how we can support each other. We know how we can grow
Mhm.
from each other. If we know what resources are out there, Walker partners with so many different people from, you know, soft skill training, hard skill training. Now we're even partnering with LE Mental Health so that we can do a pathway to mental health support for women of color who are in these situations. You know, it's a
Mhm.
job on you to have that burden. So we want to help you with that. And so that's how I got here. And that's why it's so important. And I feel like this is where I'll retire from because it's going to take a lot. You know, we're still a startup, but it takes a lot. And we need partners. We need funding. You know how that is.
Mhm.
There's a lot to do, but there's a lot to get. So that's
Yep.
my journey. That's the story.
Oh, and it's still continuing. I mean, and you are still taking your parents' advice. You are still filling a need. Like you see something that needs to be done and you're doing something about it. So that's great. And I have to say, I actually did attend one of the We Should Know Each Other events at the end of 2023, and it was amazing. Just there are people there that want to connect you or that want to connect with you and share their stories. Everyone I met there was just so friendly and just welcoming and warm, and it was just such a positive, great place to be. And then, going through the diversity and leadership program too, and making those connections there. Met a great friend, Cora Spearman from Core Adorables.
Cora is amazing. Like if we could
Yeah.
do a whole session just on Cora. Cora is in Hawaii. Cora has battled, cancer. Cora is
Mhm.
like she has been amazing. She has a beautiful family, and now she's created this B Corp, sustainable business that is sold in Bloomingdale's and was it Neiman also? And then on what cruise ships? And
Oh,
where isn't it? Right. And she's gotten all these awards because of the work that she's done. She is amazing. And if you want to follow anybody who's watching this or listening to this, if you want to follow somebody for inspiration,
oh yes.
Cora Spearman. I mean, follow me too, but
Yeah,
Cora Spearman is amazing.
she is.
I don't even know how she does it. She's all over the world. She's just, yeah, like
So
I'm obsessed,
inspiring.
but she's amazing.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And that was a connection that I made through Walker. So I have to thank you for
And
that.
and that's what it's about. We should know each other. And like she lives in Hawaii,
And
but
we're
we
friends.
still have time, right? You're friends, and she considers you a support.
Yeah.
Like that's how it works. And that program was super special because when I talk about collaborating, we collaborated with the Ohio State University. And as a result of that partnership, we were able to offer scholarships to 10 women
Hmm.
who are on their game and just needed a little more, exposure and support for operational excellence and leadership. And
Hmm.
we love doing that, right? Like we had our board meeting last week and I was going over our collaborations and all of our in-kind. And when we got to, well, there were a few that they were like, wait, I didn't even know we had this. This is amazing. And then when we got
Hmm.
to OSU and they were like, they gave us that much. I'm like, yeah, yeah, people know. This is not about DEI to me. It's really about, workforce development, economic development. It's about, growth and excellence. We talk about meritocracies, right? But they're not real if you're preventing everyone from having the access to
Hmm.
be fabulous, right? If you make the decision that a group of people shouldn't have access to the advancement in their career
Hmm.
and their financial situation because you have determined that they're not good enough. That has nothing to do with the meritocracy because you're not allowing them the access to show you how fabulous they are. And I don't care
Hmm.
what people say, we are magic.
Absolutely.
We are magic because we make it beyond all of those limitations, those isms, those biases. We work beyond that and as Maya Angelou said, still we rise.
100%. I mean, just listening to your story, it made me think about, how it seemed like there were definitely more barriers to when you were trying to pursue a career in journalism versus retail, and you're taking it even further, right? You're trying to make that even more accessible. But I don't know if there's anything that you could speak to as far as comparing the two. Like, what
Sure.
was it about, going into that other field that seemed like it was more prohibitive than going into retail?
Yeah. So one of the things was, at that time, they just weren't really opening the door, like, for a brown skinned girl, right? Like, I'm
Mm,
just putting it out there. Like, I'm not fair skinned, and they wanted to meet me because they were like, oh, you have such an exotic look, right?
mm,
Because I guess I don't look like a traditional whatever, right?
mhm,
And I remember having a conversation with my advisor, and I was like, yeah, I have these meetings, but I'm only being offered these roles in like really small markets that I just don't see a progression to a major
mhm.
market. And I wasn't really seeing anyone who, I hate to talk about colorism, but it's real, right?
It is.
Um, and he said to me, you'll get there eventually. You'll just have to have dinner with a lot of general managers and producers. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but you can do it. You're bubbly. I said, I'm not bubbly.
Mm,
Like, that is never a word you're going to use. He's like, I just mean like you can talk to most people and you'd be really good in this field, but it is going to be more of a challenge just because you're right. Like,
mhm,
you might have the features, but you're brown. He said, but here's the thing. You shouldn't be upset that these general managers and stuff want to take you to dinner. Do you know how many people would want to be in that position? And he's like, you have the
yeah,
package to get in the door. Why would you be upset with that? And I just had to do like soul searching because
mhm,
I knew myself and I was like, I can't I can't do that. Like, that's just not, why should I have to do it? Like, I'm a really good student. I have a good tape. I can articulate things. I'm smart. So, and I know what's going on in current events. I could talk about these things that are happening.
mhm.
I can interview people because I can talk to people and I want to know what your story is about. So, why should I have to put up with all the rest? And so that was my personal hurdle that I just wasn't willing to jump because I can't change what I look like. And if
Mhm.
I was going to have to stay in a role until maybe something changed, that wouldn't be. And we know it has changed. I wasn't there for that change. I
Right.
needed to have something that I could say I had, and I could see some progression. And
Mhm.
the similarities between my degree in radio, television, film, what I did, and retail is that, and I didn't realize this, I didn't know this, and I don't know that they really teach you this in those classes, because I've never been in a retail merchandising class or anything like that. But the similarity that I have found, and I can't remember the recruiter's name, but what he brought to my attention, because he would always come to me and talk about what I was wearing, because I've always loved fashion.
Mhm.
Like, always loved fashion. My mother was a model. She was 5'8". I'm not, but she was a model in Philadelphia, and I was a model until I was 15, and that was I was the tallest I was going to be.
Mm.
And so I've always been around fashion. Like, I got my mom gave me a subscription to WWD and W magazine for my 12th birthday, right?
Aw.
So I've always loved putting things together. And even if I'm just casual, like, I like to look a certain way. And so he used to always stop me and talk about what I had on. Cause like I was chick with the big earrings and, had my hair wrapped, or I had my EK glasses on. Like, I was just like, if it's happening, I have to.
Yes.
And so he would always talk to me about it. Like, tell me the story, like, what's going on with this outfit. And I would have a story. Right. Or he would see me talking to people. And he said to me, he was like, A, you really do connect with people, right? B, you have a sense of style. and you can tell a story. He's like, because I know you didn't think about a story when you put those clothes on, but when I ask you a story about the clothes, like you could come up with a story like that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, that is what the crux, the heart of retail is. It's telling stories that connect with consumers, but you tell stories through marketing and through product.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you connect. And if you can tell those stories, like you just told me, you can tell them anywhere. And those stories are what will make you successful. People who can't tell stories, like you should be able to tell stories with your data. You should be able to tell a story with anything. And
Mm.
that's what the heart of retail is about. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. So my education is going to get to use. I'll be able to use
Mhm.
my education, but in a different way. So that's the connection.
Well, absolutely. I mean, speaking of storytelling, you led a session on the power of vocal activism, amplifying good trouble through your voice at the recent summit. And in it, you shared a compelling story about how you experienced the beginning of a heart attack as you're about to board a plane and how that forced you to reflect on the pressures that were weighing on you at the time. Can you give listeners a little more insight into that moment and just explain a little bit more about how storytelling and vulnerability and openness play into advocating for change?
Sure. So yeah, that was a pretty dark time, honestly. So I was working at a company that really wasn't appreciating me. They had, you hear about the glass cliff. You've heard about the glass cliff. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you read in the paper and you see all these marketing tropes like, oh, the glass cliff, the glass ceiling, the broken rung, all these things.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard of it, but I lived it. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, can I speak on that? And so I was working for a job and just like having success. And what was interesting is that the people who had been there, who hadn't realized those things, after I think my third success, they were like planting doubt, which was easy because I was the first and the only, right? And so they were planting
Mm.
doubt, saying, oh, well, did she really do that? Or was it a result of this? Like, well, that makes no sense because this has been there for years. I came in and this happened. That hadn't happened before. So I'm fighting that. Then they're like, oh, well, we want to give you more responsibility. Instead of a promotion, we want to give you more responsibility because, we want to prepare you for this big promotion. So I had 3 departments I was leading. One I had to build. They had said that I was getting a budget. They didn't give me the budget for the support. Like I had to fight for every person I brought in. It was a lot. And I was traveling, I was commuting back and forth and working crazy hours, stressed out, like couldn't sleep. And they were asking me on top of all that to memorize SKUs. And this might sound silly and little, but anybody who understands the business knows, especially when you're in a business that has accessories and knickknacks and other items, there are thousands of SKUs at all times.
Mhm.
I was the chief merchant and an SVP. So I was a chief merchant and a senior vice president over 2 other areas. So I had 3 areas. I had assistants, associates, buyers, VPs, directors, all reporting to me. I would never ask any of them to memorize anything because your brain is not for memorization, it's for action. And my boss was saying, yeah, you're doing great, but you got to memorize those numbers because you can't look at your reports. Now, there were other people, they had their reports.
Mhm.
They looked at their reports, but for some reason, I had to memorize these numbers. So in addition to traveling all around, making all the changes, doing the things, taking them from, 35% on time delivery to 97% on time delivery, which that's all money, right? That's all money.
Mhm.
All this other stuff, they're talking that I don't memorize my numbers. So I'm like in a space now and I'm so stressed out about the moving. Then they were like, you have to move here. I'm like, well, I'm renting a house. No, you have to move your family because we've committed to you. And so we need to know you've committed to us. Well,
Mm.
I am. I'm here every day. You see me. You see me every day.
Mhm.
You have to buy a house. So now I have to move my family. And I had to buy a house within a week. Because
Right.
I kept saying, well, I'm renting a house, like it shouldn't be a problem here. No, you need to have a house by this date. It was just like, like you can, like all these stressors coming at me, because I was like, oh damn, now I gotta tell my family they're moving. I
Mhm.
just picked the house. Like the house we live in now, it's 8 years later. I took the realtor out and I was like, okay, I have to pick a house today. She took me all over and I was like, okay, I picked this one. Right. Like it wasn't right. But I'm living with all that. And then it was my husband's birthday. And the kids wanted to do a big, we had told them we were moving, so we wanted to do a big thing. So I have caterers and stuff, and I'm like flying back to get that all together, and all these people
A
are coming.
lot.
It was a lot. And then I get to the airport because I have to come back here to work, and I'm sitting waiting for to board, and I hear her say, boarding group, whatever. And I'm like, okay, get up. Like in my head, I'm like, okay, it's time to get up.
Mhm.
My body won't move.
Oh.
I feel this intense pain. And I'm like, okay, what's happening? What's happening? So I'm on the phone with my friend and I just start crying. And she's
Mm.
like, what is going on? But I'm not a crier. She's like, are you crying? I'm like, I can't move. I said, I can talk, but I can't move. And it has terrible pain in my chest. And so they come over, like they check me out, and they're like, yeah, we don't know. So we call the doctor, and he's like, he asked them some questions, and he was like, get her on the flight. I'll meet her. So I got on the flight. I got back. A friend was waiting for me, and we went right to the doctor. And he said, okay, you didn't have a heart attack, but here's what's happening. And my actual like organs were starting to break, like they were starting to shut down because of the stress, because I didn't sleep, because I was always thinking, like my mind was going crazy, like I got all these things I got to do, I'm responsible, I have moved my family so many times for my job. Now my husband's gonna have to, like, he's got this going on, and on top of it, like I have to memorize these things, that I had just worked my system into such a tizzy. I ended up having pericarditis, which is an infection of your heart, but it
Mm.
comes from stress, can come from stress. And it can lead to a heart attack. And
Mm.
in addition, there were just a lot of things happening. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to put you in the hospital. And then we're going to take the next 6 weeks to get you back. Right.
Mm.
So then on top of the physical things that were happening, then the whole mental thing of, oh, I thought I was magic and I could do all these things. And now I'm shut down and I can't do any
Mm.
of them. So now what does that make me? Right. Who am I if I
Mm.
can't do everything? Like if I can't like put, if I can't, like dive and punch and do all the things I need to do to be me and just take on everything, who am I? And what's my worth? And so that was what I shared, because it was ridiculous thought for me to say, what is my worth when I'm not magic? I'm
Mm.
I'm a human being, and I'm good with working hard, but I shouldn't have to work like 3 men
Mhm.
to be acknowledged for what I'm bringing to the table. And I should not have to work until I have a heart disease
Mm.
to, um, to prove that I'm worthy of being where I am. And I had gotten to that, and I never felt that before. But at
Mm.
this one company, that's how they made me feel. Like I
Mm.
had to do that. And then once I came back after all that, um, they came at me with something, and I was like, yeah, I'm sorry that we have to have this conversation, but we're gonna have this conversation.
Mm.
And after I had the conversation, they're like, well, no one's really given us challenges like that. We'll get back to you. That was on Tuesday. And on Friday, they called me to the big office, and they had their chief legal counsel and their head of HR. And when I walked in, I knew. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing? Okay.
Mm.
And they're like, based on your challenges, we think you probably don't want to work here anymore. And then they came up with they're like, and while you were out, this happened.
Mm.
So I said, and while I was out, that happened. So what does that have to do with me? Well, if you had done this before you left, because I knew I was leaving, I had no idea that I was going to have this heart thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was coming back on Monday because that's why I was on the plane, right? Coming back. But I said, no worries, no problem. I have an attorney, and I negotiated my exit before my entrance. So I think I'm going to be good. Peace. I really was that chill. And you know what I did when I left?
What did you do?
I went to the movies.
Oh,
I did. I went to the movies. I left that meeting and I went to the movies. And I was like, this is chill. I've got good popcorn and Coca-Cola and I'm cool. Because I was more stressed out then because we were further along, in our process with family. But the reaction to, my family was like, well, we were wondering when you were going to like stop.
oh.
Right? Because we weren't enjoying you. You weren't enjoying you. And it was it became just like money. Like it's just a paycheck. Right. And we all need a paycheck because, you need to pay your bills, but it shouldn't kill you.
Oh, no.
To do your job. And sometimes being in these corporate settings as we are, especially as women of color, and this is a story I've shared and other people have experienced it. And I know recently, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but you might remember her, but there was a professor who she was experiencing all of those things and felt like this pressure, like I have to be this person, I have to be that, I have to show up this way. If I, do this, I'm judged in this way, and no support. And she killed herself. And I will say that there were days where I was like, well, I don't want to kill myself, but if a truck hit my car and I was in the hospital for a little while, it would be okay. That is jacked up thinking. But when you have so many things coming at you, you feel like, whoa, what's next? Or I can't get out of this, but I want to get out of this, And so that conversation with, like, it was screwed up because they lied and they made up some stuff. But it was my way out. And I have not been more. It's been a long time. Like when I went there, I really started to feel like maybe I wasn't who I thought I was. But then when I left and I was really able, that's when I went to Bandier. I became the president of Bandier, doing what I knew how to do, had the board appoint me as president. I was like, okay, so you're good. And then starting with WACRA and the work we've done and the response we get, I was like, okay, so all of that, if I had to go through all of that to get here, it's great. Because there's not a day I don't like enjoy what I'm doing, and it's not without stress. I mean, the startup, it's tough. And we are not a startup that was really growing during the COVID, when other organizations that were focused on workforce development and economic development, they were growing because people were throwing money at them. So that they could feel better about themselves, about what was going on, socially with the loss of George Floyd and Breonna, their murders. And, there's so much that has happened since then, but people don't seem to care as much. And so I think the work we're doing is even more important.
It really is. And sharing your story. So, I mean, was it hard for you at first to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to share openly and be transparent about what happened?
Oh, absolutely. And so that time I was out, because my doctor was amazing, right? And so I was in the hospital to deal with this. And then I got a therapist. I got a psychiatrist who was like, yeah, I'm not sure why you're beating yourself up, but we gotta figure it out.
Mm.
So then, because, once you get to that state of acute anxiety and depression, um, it's hard to come out. Like, people know about clinical depression,
Mhm.
kinda, um, but acute anxiety and depression shows up a little differently, right? Like, I wasn't sad. I was just manic,
Mm.
right? And anxious. But I wasn't like, if you talked to me, you wouldn't know I was anxious. It was my thinking and how it was internalized, so it was in my body, right?
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
I had medical support, I had, mental and emotional support. I went to off on-site. So, because I had to I had to get back to who I was, and on-site's great
Mm.
because it makes you kind of relive things, so but shows you a different way of living them,
Mm. I'm
right?
sorry, can you explain a little bit more
Yeah.
on-site?
On-site is a place in, Cumberland, Tennessee,
Mm.
right outside of Nashville, and, if you watch Dr. Phil, which is Dr. Phil is a whole whole 'nother thing, but if you've ever watched
Mhm.
Dr. Phil, he often, um, sends people who have had trauma
Mhm.
to on-site. And
Okay.
so I was, when I had my therapist and my psychiatrist, I was diagnosed with PTSD,
Ooh.
which is acute anxiety and depression
Mhm.
caused by, um, trauma. And so my work situation was deemed traumatic based on how I was being treated compared to other people, like the hours working, you know,
Mhm.
the calls I might get like early, early in the morning or the emails late, late at night, respond to this. The whole, like all of, and then being treated in the room, in the meetings in a different way,
Mm.
right? When you're working really hard and you're seeing success, but nobody's acknowledging that, or
Mm.
they just keep throwing things at you that undermine you in front of other people,
Mhm.
right? Those are like bombs, right? And this is something that women of color experience all the time in these mostly in corporate settings, but
Mhm.
those are like emotional and physical bombs, right? And for somebody who's not outward with their I'm not gonna ever give anybody a free show. So, like, you say some crazy stuff to me, I'm gonna have an answer for you. Like, those are the things that you have to kinda work through in your head, like, "You can't say that to me. I can
Mhm.
tell you about that." But the fact that they felt comfortable saying it, that is internalized.
Mhm.
Those are all traumatic things that shouldn't happen to anybody. So they had diagnosed me with PTSD and, some unrealized things because, becoming legal guardian for my grandparents and my parents at such
Yeah.
an early age, like I was in my 20s. And, my mom died in February. My aunt, who had been with my mom every day when I couldn't be there, and then I would come home. I come home on Thursdays to make sure, like, she got to her oncologist for, appointments and stuff. But my aunt, who had been with my mom every day, she passed in April, and then my grandmother passed in August. And I was at work in New York when my grandmother passed, and then I had to go to Philly and I was responsible for the funeral, right? And then
Wow.
funeral was Saturday, and then Saturday night I had to fly to Korea for work. And so I never had an opportunity, right? Then
Mhm.
I had gotten married, then I had my kids, and then my dad got sick, and then
Aw.
you know, he was already sick, but he was in a good condition, then he died. Then I had to bury my grandparents, I had to bury my
Mm.
godparents, and I still had to keep it moving. So that was all unresolved in my body. And then I'm at
Mm.
this job where it's just this constant, like, bombs coming at me and
Mhm.
all of that, because that's the other thing, we're caregivers. Women of color are caregivers. And so there's very little justice for us
Mm.
because it's usually just us, and we're doing everything we have to do to keep the pieces together and to make sure everybody's taken care of, right? And who's doing that for us? And that causes PTSD. And so on site is this incredible place, and they have different buildings and different things that they offer. But one of the things that they help with is helping you find yourself through trauma. And if you experience, all kinds of different trauma, and they do it in small cohorts, and you become friends with those people because you share very personal things.
Oh yeah.
And so like I had to, like, they worked me through like the losses, and then how to kind of take care of myself now, because as an adult I was an orphan, right? So now you don't think about those things. So but once I came through that, I really was I was like such a strong person. Like I was always a strong person, but it was like you felt like pieces of you were being like just pushed away, and now I felt whole, and I was able to grieve like I had never done that before. And they gave me the permission and the tools to do it effectively and productively for my health, my mental health. And I came back, and that's why when they came at me at work with the things they came at me, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, we have to have this conversation, but that's not going to work. And here's why it's not going to work. When I said that, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm back.
Yes.
I'm back, because I know I had been so broken down before. I probably would have just been like, all right, whatever. Where there was no, all right, whatever. And that led to me leaving there and being on this journey that I'm on now. And, I just feel like I'm home. I'm home with myself. I'm home with my purpose, right? I just feel free to be me. And
to advocate for yourself.
To advocate for myself and for other people. And I can't stand a bully. And I feel like that situation with my job, with the heart and all of that, I have been surrounded by bullies. Right. And I was fighting and fighting until I just couldn't fight anymore. And that treatment I had with my doctor over those 7 weeks, and all the different outlets, even Canyon Ranch, which is but they had a special program for PTSD. And it was amazing between that and on-site and all this stuff. And I'm blessed, and I was blessed enough that I could be in a situation to have all those tools. But I would say it's not about the money, it's about finding different ways to have those outlets for yourself. Right. And that's why those programs are so important to me with WACRA. Like I was excited to say about our pathways for mental health. Look, there was nowhere there was nowhere that I could have called while I was in that situation that understood what I was going through and could provide a service that was specifically for me or anybody like me who was dealing with bullies like that. There wasn't. So now we have that, because we understand it intimately, and we can work with the practitioners to make sure that you're getting the service you need. And so I think that, it's no longer just us. It is really us working together so that we can deliver justice for all. Yeah, that's what I would leave you with.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just so much appreciation for your time today. Also want to thank the listeners. And until next time, keep working toward justice for all.
Thank you.